We might as well get started because Lyle is walking back towards us. I feel like we're so small tonight. We do have a fair amount to do, however. It's nice to see everyone in the sun. Yes. I would like us to make sure that we do go over the forum dates, the potential forum dates by the end of this meeting, because that's something just, I guess I'm saying that out loud just so Amy, you can help me remember that. Yep. Tonight we are going to review the articles as in a similar fashion perhaps to what we did last time. I think a couple of school boards have already met and started to review them, so we could touch base on that. We will also hear from Frank on some tax impact language. Also, I think we have ballot language to look at from Chris Leopold. Ron and I met with Barb and all the town clerks, and so we have some stuff to present to you. Did you print something out, or do you have a printout of that? If we don't have a printout, I have something that I can at least go over with you guys and then email you, and then we can post it for more of a flushed out election calendar for us to consider. But we will talk about that in more depth. Also, we have a slot available for the study committee on Monday the 25th to meet with Donna Russo-Savage, Brad, what's Brad's last name? James, and Nikki South. So we should talk about whether we want to take advantage of that. I would encourage that we do take that slot. But let's go ahead and approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion we approve the minutes as written.
I will second that motion.
Any discussion? Yeah.
In the section about the Article 1 discussion,
Yeah.
I brought up several points which I feel are over-summarized to the point of being truncated.
Okay.
I would suggest that first bullet point read, the concern that the dual vote wording takes away options from the electorate, disenfranchises voters, causes vote inequality, and unduly pressures town votes.
Can I see your thing and I'll...
If you can read my right.
Yes.
So that would be a quote from Ian
Yes.
in there?
Yep.
Okay, you good with that?
Yep.
Anything else? Everyone's comfortable with that? Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Please stand. Thank you, everyone. So let's go ahead and hear from members of the public. Does that make sense?
Sure.
I could review process, but I think we're all up to date on that. Okay, so shall we go from left to right, or how do you want to do it? Who's interested in having something to say? Okay. So Deb, why not you, and then Tom, and then...
You can make me last.
Okay, because Tom has a lot to share with us. So
I
Deb
just,
Hebert
from
sorry,
Vernon.
Vernon.
Deb Hebert from Vernon.
Did you pass something around?
Yes.
All the time? So obviously, as you all know, please sign the piece of paper and put what town you're from. Thanks.
I just want to say I prefer to speak at the end, because I usually have questions at the end after hearing the discussion versus the beginning.
Well, right now we're doing them at the beginning. We've been doing them at the beginning for the last couple of months.
I know.
If we have room for public comment at the end, we will go ahead and do that, but right now we're just doing it at the beginning.
I know, but it seems like the questions come after, and then by the time the next meeting comes around, you kind of forget what you really wanted to impose, but if that's your rule, that's your rule.
Yeah, that's what we're doing right now. And again, if we have time at the end, we certainly, for example, at the last meeting, we did make time at the end, so did you?
Well, I wonder if you could just set aside 15 minutes at the end.
We should, let's hope for that, but we can't promise it. Do you wanna throw anything in now?
Nope.
Okay,
No,
so, Jody, and then, yeah.
Jody Normando from Dummerston. This is more just a point of information, I guess. I've been watching the Wyndham Central Executive Board discuss Act 46, and it is pre-study committee, I want to let you know. But I'm very impressed. They have a facilitator that is really working with all the boards to bring out what people want and what they, to just flush out everything. And if anybody gets a chance to watch them, they've already had 2 meetings, they've got another 2 set up, but their concerns are just like our concerns, and they've been being talked about in a very friendly, informational way. And it's fascinating to compare it to what's been going on here. I feel that the process, if we had only started with the process and started with the community and started with a facilitator that was really working with them, and he seems to be pretty good so far. He doesn't seem to be making any of his own opinions. I think we may have ended up at the same place, but I think it would have been in a much easier, much better atmosphere and much better way throughout the whole thing than this has, because my frustration is we have not really started out including the community. I know in Dummerston some of us are working hard to educate the community outside of the school boards, but I would recommend that if anybody's insomniac or whatever, that they might want to watch the Wyndham Central Executive Committees with it's Stephen Dale, who was head of the Vermont School Boards Association at one time, who's the facilitator. And I just feel that we don't really have a facilitator. We have a lawyer and all that other stuff, but watch it.
Yeah,
So
Sean
go ahead.
Murphy, from Guilford. I was just wondering, looking ahead, and whether it will come to fruition or not is questionable at this point, but I'm looking at the representatives and how the representatives will actually be voted on and so forth. Unfortunately, it's only 45 days from yesterday that the petitions would have to be submitted to whatever body that would be, because it has to be no more than 40 and no less than 30 prior to the vote. So if you chose a voting day on June 28th, I think it's May 24th is the day that they have to be submitted.
May 23rd.
May 23rd?
Yeah, we'll go over all those dates, I have them all.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
All right.
That's what I was referring to when Ron, I, and Barb
Yeah.
met with all the town clerks.
Yeah. So, anyway, I think it's, a lot of decisions have to be made by a lot of people, whether they want to try that, whether it's gonna happen or not, because you don't know. But, personally, I would probably start thinking about it myself. And so, if I had the vehicle, the petition language, you could always get signatures, and then if you decided not to do it, not submit it. So I would like to have that clarified.
Yeah, that's something we're working on, talking about. Is Tom the last person to speak? Do you want to say something? Okay, great, thanks. Tom?
So I sent you all emails, I hope you got them. I've been also struck by how when you all encounter a question or I was thinking about your problem when you said that you've been holding these forums and nobody comes. And then I think part of the reason for that is that when you all have a question, you go up with your question. You ask the lawyer, you ask the State Board of Ed. You don't say, let me take that back to my town. So I don't think people in the towns feel an involvement and an investment, knowing. In Putney, it's all sort of word of mouth, but So that encapsulates some of what's actually, to my mind, what's wrong with this model, is that it is a top-down removed from the town's model. So that's it. I had what I think was a very good, fruitful discussion with the Putney Board, and I'm aware that to sit in the audience and say, I don't like this and I don't like that, I mean, people should do that because that's how democracy works, but it's much more fruitful to have something substantive to offer as an alternative. So I've offered you an alternative. I'm aware that it is not fully in the spirit of the law as the legislature passed it. I'm not naive, I get that. Although I think it meets the law. I don't know whether it will pass muster with lawyers and with State Board of Ed and with the commissioner. I'm aware that it is very much a rough draft and would need a lot of tweaking, and that there are things in it that are probably quite unworkable and some things that are workable. But it puts some substance to a way of thinking about how we can meet the terms of the law, benefit from consolidation, benefit from ways in which the buying power and knowledge and experience of the central office can really be harnessed so that local boards aren't wasting their time doing things like going through warrants every week. I mean, I know it's not a waste of time, and it's a way that you keep track of expenses, but really, so I don't have any authority or power to make you consider that proposal or to figure out a way to fold it into the articles that you have already drafted. I put it all under Leadership Council, but I did that only because that's the only place I could think to put it. Obviously, a lot of the sort of local governance stuff could easily go in other places in the article. That's an example of how rough a draft it is. I know that. It's really a question of whether you even want to discuss it. If you don't, and it's like, no, we're on the accelerated merger track and we're going to do the state's model, then okay, people in the towns will do what they feel like they need to do, and we'll see how it all shakes out. If you do, there are people out there, who would happily work with you on it. So I have watched school boards work for many years. I know many of you have. I think they're a very effective governance tool. I also think particularly our central office is a very effective governance tool. So this is an effort to get the best of both. Other than all of what it says in the proposal itself, unless somebody wants to ask me questions and people want to discuss it, you got my work in front of you.
Could I,
Yeah.
be appropriate for you to comment?
Yep.
I'd just like to take a couple minutes to comment on it.
Absolutely.
And so, I don't know if the page, I don't believe the pages are numbered, but it's in the second page.
I'm afraid they are.
What?
I didn't number them.
Oh, okay, yeah. So,
I realized after I printed them.
yeah, so if you just turn to the second page under personnel hiring, staff review, evaluation, firing, that whole paragraph, well, actually, it's the second paragraph, SU shall develop criteria, procedures, hiring, performance evaluation. So we currently have that. So that's already in place and it's in statute. So that whole section is what we're already doing.
Starting from the SU shall develop?
Yeah,
Right, okay.
yeah, so that's all in place. Another section in parentheses, as all personnel are now SD employees, the process for sharing staff across and among schools is greatly simplified. So That happens in a unified district, it doesn't happen in a separate 6 districts. Then further down on that page, where it has the leadership council with assistance from superintendent shall develop procedures for responsibilities for evaluation, feedback, hiring and firing principal. Again, that's already in place. It's current.
Sorry, and that wouldn't change under a new.
No, no. A lot of that's governed by statute, and then in some cases, master agreements, which would be really the next section about the teaching
What
staff.
this is attempting to do is keep some involvement, some local involvement in that process. Right? That is, the leadership council would be involved in those decisions
Well,
in the way that local boards are now.
yeah, I
Right.
mean, local boards are not involved with performance reviews, other than the principal getting feedback from the superintendent. So at the top of the next page, I think it seems to go into general teaching staff. So again, that's governed by the master agreement, which is in place and would continue to be in place. So I don't see in those pages that I'm commenting on, I just put a note, no difference. I mean, that's what we're currently doing. The bottom of the page, we have budget creation. The second paragraph, each principal shall by November develop simple format budget. In fact, what happens now is each principal, along with the superintendent and business administrator, actually does develop the budget. And at that point, we then share it with the board. So in this case, would be the leadership council. And then on the top of the next page, the difference here in your suggestion is that you'd keep annual town meeting.
Right. Some form of it.
Yeah.
Right.
That next paragraph on that page, the final proposed school budget shall be passed by the leadership council, I would add, in the unified board. You know, the leadership council is recommending that budget
Right.
to the board, and they would have the
Okay,
authority.
that's how it was meant to be written, I didn't know. That was the intent, is what you said.
Yes. So those are just my comments. I think
Right.
the other sections we actually do already.
And the idea is that what we're doing now that works, I want to hang on to.
Right.
And what I'm afraid of is that with a full-blown SU, we'll lose a lot of it. So yes, a lot of what we're doing now is reflected in this. Will it be 3 years from now if we don't have something like that? I doubt it.
See, I disagree. I think it'd have to be. You'd have to have those practices in place. They can't go away.
There would be there's not even any, the moment the SU is created, the local school board disappears. Right? It ceases to
I'm
exist.
referring to the practices that you identified in this draft.
I'll give you an example, okay? At Putney Town Meeting, there was this big brouhaha about the music teacher. I don't know the music teacher, I don't know anything about it, but obviously, parents were upset about it, the board was involved, you were involved. It sounds like it was handled as well as it could possibly, blah, blah, blah. I get all that. But people had a place to stand up, ask questions about it, even if their questions essentially were, we can't answer them. And the board was the local board, the Putney board was very involved in the process. Under the SU model, there is no Putney board to be involved in any process. They disappear.
But see, I think that's where the leadership council would be involved. And
Then
that
we're in
would-
complete
and that would-
agreement.
And that would be the group, instead of in a town meeting, which is very inappropriate for
I
that
agree.
discussion. That would have happened at a local leadership advisory council meeting. There would have been clear understandings. There still would have been information that we couldn't
Right.
share, but at least there would have been a more appropriate discussion at that level than in a town meeting.
That's exactly what I'm trying to do here.
And so that's why I'm saying, that would not go away. In fact, it would be enhanced, from my perspective, your example.
That's my fondest dream. That's exactly the point.
Folks, do we want to go through the articles and then touch on leadership councils and ask Tom questions at that point? Does that make sense? Yeah? Hi, Fran. You have some stuff to share with us, some information. Do you want to do that before we go through the articles, or
I would-
tell me what you think?
I would think when we go to the articles, there'll be appropriate time for that to come in.
Okay, so just chime in if I'm not
Sounds good.
positive. Which of your boards have started to chat about the report? So has Vernon? Okay, and the UHS has looked at the report?
They've looked at it.
Okay, all right, so good, I just want to make sure. Brattleboro, yes, so every board, okay. So, anything, how do we want to go through this? So the first page, Dummerston School Board, Amy Wall is the voting member for the study committee, and Christina is is she here? She's the alternative, correct?
Yeah, and executive.
Okay. So that page has changed there. Our draft name is still Wyndham Southeast School District. No one has suggested really working on another name, right? I would, other than Amy and I have passed, we've talked about it, but I'd love to hear some other suggestions, but we don't have to do that now. Anything in the first section? Executive summary? How about Article 1? And Ron, you'll chime in at any point? Article 1?
What did we decide that we were going to make Brattleboro the only necessary?
We haven't decided that.
In Article 1, Dummerston had a very brief conversation about it last night. We had a lot of other stuff to go through, but what did come out of that conversation was the board felt that the wording of the language for the vote, they would rather see a single vote.
As opposed to
the combined, which is if not accelerated, then they would like to just see if not accelerated, then we don't. We
Go back to
say
start
over. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Or reconvene.
Yes.
It's a better word than start over.
Did they give what their reasons were?
It wasn't exactly clear to me, but some of them that I thought of, as we discussed with, it's difficult enough explaining Act 46 and the Article of Agreement to the towns, even with this framework, that it would be, as a voter, you might not feel too great about voting down the accelerated option, only to be restricted by this other option that isn't spelled out as well as an accelerated, that it's sort of undetermined until after the vote is taken.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, it's similar to the concerns I think that Ian brought up at the last meeting. It sounds like, okay.
Yep.
The Vernon board would concur with that, having just a single choice.
Any other comments? Richard? Yeah. My concern there would be restricting some towns who do want to merge, telling them that they can't.
I think that was Guilford's perception was,
Yes.
if we're interested in this, we wanna start as soon as possible. So we wouldn't wanna be held back.
So a MUD would allow a town to not merge, or a town who wanted to.
And yet
to
not
merge.
prevent somebody else.
Right, so a MUD actually gives
More leeway.
more leeway.
Right.
Yeah.
The thing that I got from last night's discussion was to give it more time. And I think I said that, you know, if a town votes against this and the MUD goes through, that town has another year.
Yeah.
One of the things that we didn't get to last night, and I think it is germane to this discussion, Brattleboro Town just had a forum last Wednesday, and they used the PowerPoint that Beth put together for Guilford's forum, and one slide that had been used. I think it really relates to this discussion, so if you wouldn't mind, I'll distribute this, and I think we have enough for everyone.
Do you have enough for this?
Yeah, I do, yeah. And if you don't get one this way, you're gonna get one this way. Oh, I should keep that. Thanks. There you go.
At Brattleboro's meeting, you said you were gonna put the stuff that was at Brattleboro's meeting up on the 46, and I haven't seen it up yet. Are you still gonna put it up?
I don't think the PowerPoint is, because I think we wanted to share it with this group before we did that. I'm hoping with, I'm not sure how the technology will work in this room, I'm hoping that at a certain point we'll be able to use that PowerPoint.
Do you want to talk us through this, or?
I'll wait until it gets distributed. So, again, this is from the work that the group, that the subcommittee that did the, all the options,
Yeah.
this document, and tried to put it in some sort of format that would make sense. So, status quo, there'd be no incentives, additional costs incurred if no action taken, subject to state Board of Education discretion. The additional costs, one of the things that I think about is we're receiving a grant that's paying our legal fees. And I think the grant was something like $20,000 to $30,000 that we could apply to legal fees or facilitation. And so that would not be available to us in that case. And I know this is not answering that question like right off, but as you go through the options, that's I think what we're going to get to. Self-study, study committee has identified lack of equity through the SU. Self-study process will be time-consuming and again incur new costs, because again you wouldn't get those grants to support what we're doing now. It certainly has an impact on the tax impact without the, what are they calling those, the transition funds?
Yeah.
So then, looking at a new Union Elementary system without Brattleboro Town, merging K-8 similar schools, Dummerston and Putney does not meet the minimum school requirement of Act 46. So all the 900 students there, and you see the Dummerston, Putney, and totals. Merging K-6 similar schools of Guilford and Vernon wouldn't be possible because there is school choice in Vernon and not for Guilford. Again, that doesn't meet the minimum size requirements. Merging Dummerston, Putney, and Guilford. Not all the same grades operating in all three schools. So, in other words, Guilford would need to withdraw from the 7th and 8th grade program at BAMS, BUHS 6, to have like schools, K through 8, but it also doesn't meet the minimum size requirements of Act 46. And then I think another option was New Union Elementary with Brattleboro Town Elementary. So just the elementary schools all together, and then the Union High School separate. Requires a structural change at BUHS 6 grade levels. Does not comply. Well, so in that case it would be some schools, like Brattleboro Town has K-6, some have K-8. Again, Guilford is K-6, the middle school is going to BAMS. So it would create a structural change at UHS 6 in terms of the students that they would, the incoming grades. Doesn't comply with Act 46 preferred structure, lack of scale to achieve program development and equity. So I guess part of the reasoning for this is to say, okay, so what other options are there available? And if a school opts out, what would they do? So that's the concern in terms of that proceeding that way.
Under status quo, what types of additional costs are you talking about incurred if no action taken?
You wouldn't get the transition grant money.
Mhm.
You wouldn't get the money that we're getting now for legal fees.
So as soon as we decide we're not merging this year, under accelerated, the legal fee?
No, because if you continue for a study committee, I think the point there is if you said, we're just keeping it the way it is, and you didn't continue with the study
For as
committee.
long as we can,
Yeah,
versus taking option 2, which means we want another year to figure things out.
Okay.
I do have a question if we, and I have 2 questions. One, has the date of a meeting been set when we will formally vote on whether we like the two option wording or going back to the first,
Okay,
the
we
one
would do-
option wording?
Yeah, we'll talk about that
Okay, so there is
later.
a date that we're scheduled to do that.
Yeah, we should talk about it. Setting.
And so
It's early May.
kind of half following up, if we went back to the original language, how does the language at the very beginning of this section, necessary versus advisable, work at that point?
Do you want to address that?
So
Well,
if everybody votes yes, we merge, who has to vote no to decide we don't, we will do a self-study for you?
What I understood initially is everybody is necessary.
So this
Under
first
the
language.
beginning
goes
of
for-
Article 1,
Yes.
bottom of page 4, everybody would be necessary, and if one town chose not to, then it's.
Okay, so we would go back to that language if it was decided to have just merge or study more. Okay, thank you.
What would happen, if we had that alternative mud option and the towns that voted no don't move forward with the merger? Would they continue with the study committee process to try to figure out what they
would
wanted
have-
to do?
Well,
Well, they're on the study committee. That's my understanding.
like Huntington, I keep using that
Yeah.
example from Mount Mansfield Unified District. They chose not to be involved. So they're still in the Unified High School District.
Mhm,
They have a voting member on the board.
mhm.
They have no say in the Union District pre-K through 5 or 6, whatever their grades
Right.
cover.
Are they considered in the eyes of the state as being status quo, doing nothing?
I don't know, because I think they're part of the Union Unified District. I think the state board would have to make a determination within the next couple of years. So they've been in that situation for just over a year. They put it out to their voters again this past March to join the union, and the voters again decided not to.
Okay.
So, I don't know if they have like 2 more years to figure something out.
So if Vernon and Dummerston vote no, can they then, and everybody else, and we had that mud language and everybody else moved forward, could then Vernon and Dummerston meet up with Marlboro and whoever else and move on, or?
They could
So
explore
they
those
could
sorts of things.
continue looking at options for,
Yeah. And again, I think you have to look at these requirements that,
Yeah.
so would that work?
right,
But then if the choice was to do nothing, they would still face the penalties that would come later on.
Yeah.
Would they have to apply for a new study committee grants and
Yes.
everything? Okay.
The other thing related to that scenario of two of our SU towns not moving forward with a union, Chris Leopold had said that you're now entertaining this concept of the side-by-side scenario, and what he described with Donna Russo Savage is that it seems unlikely there's a viable path for a side-by-side configuration, because the side-by-side requires one side to be a K-12 unified system. The other side has to have at least two schools that have the same configuration. So they're somewhat familiar with our region, and they couldn't imagine a viable, K-12 union with a side-by-side, knowing our region. So again, it comes back to if we take this option away from our own supervisory union to move forward with a unified system, there doesn't seem to be that many, any other viable paths available. So then it might be what Ron's describing. Well, eventually, you reconsider, a town reconsiders becoming a full member of the new union.
Can we go on to Article 2? So this is the article about choice. What discussions happened at your respective boards about choice, burning choice for 10 years?
We didn't get onto that.
Did any of you guys get into it?
Brattleboro doesn't have the action.
But,
We don't
No,
have
but
that.
we didn't, it wasn't really discussed at the,
It wasn't discussed at board level, but in communication with some of the administration, was, if we wanna be equal now, why do we go 10 years out?
yeah,
And I've struggled with that myself in the sense that 10 years is a long time. I can understand a child going into their senior year wanting to finish their senior year in the school that they're in, or maybe even if you're going into 9th grade, the 4 years. That's that seems more realistic and doable to me. My personal feeling is the longer we prolong it, the less equal we're going to be. And that's just my feeling. I'm not sure what anyone else feels, but I'm throwing that out there because I feel like if we're gonna be equal, we need to do it together and be a good, community together.
I think when we discussed this in Putney, that was a very similar position of the members of the board, was the thought that 10 years seemed like an awful generous model, and that it opened it up for lots more conversation about equity.
Ian?
Did we find out about the possibility of tying that to the individual students rather than to a number of years that we talked about at the last meeting?
Some districts have used grandfathering the current students that would be enrolled, so it would be, in this case, 7th, like next year's 7th graders through 12th graders would be grandfathered, based on the students.
Yeah, can we give it to all students currently enrolled in a Vernon school? Which is what we specifically.
That would be an option to consider, and that would be 13 years versus 10.
13 years, but only for the kids there now. Rather than the
Yeah.
town has this for 10 years, it's okay, the kids in the school system that had this don't lose it. So it's a very different way of presenting that.
That still quite generous.
It is generous.
I mean, not that I don't feel like we shouldn't do something.
It is
because I
generous,
truly
but
feel
it's,
like
but
we
it's a
should.
I
different,
think it
I
addresses,
think it's different to say, hey, this kid that has it now doesn't lose it versus this town keeps this for 10 years.
I think
it addresses, for me, it addresses the concern of the families who have moved there specifically for that. I guess I haven't really decided where I stand, but I can understand that tying it to the kids so that it addresses that specific issue of moving into that town for that reason.
I think there was consensus among the group that 7 through 12 made sense. If they were already in another school, that we would continue them forward, but that anybody who would enter in that if you were already enrolled in one of the Vernon school, in a Vernon school, that doesn't mean that you were able to do choice at 7.
And Walter Vernon had discussion with it.
Well, yeah, we thought it was very generous, but I think the consensus is we're trying to maintain choice forever, for as long as
Right.
possible. And so if, I don't think that, once again, I won't speak for the voters of Vernon, but I'm not sure this would be the reason. At least I'm gonna get the deal, and, I'm not gonna worry about what happens in 10 or 15 years. I'm not sure that would sway them one way or the other. But certainly, we did say it was a very generous benefit to add to the articles of agreement.
So when you guys next talk with your boards, I'd strongly suggest that you hunker down on what your board would feel. Obviously, as study committee representatives, you're talking to your board and you're bringing, as part of the process, you're bringing the concerns of your boards here, but it is you guys are making some hard decisions on your own as a part of this group. But to go back, so I just wanna clarify that, so that when we're next talking about this, we really can make a decision about what we are all comfortable with, knowing how our boards and communities feel, okay? Yeah. Can we move on? Collective bargaining agreements, anyone wanna delve into that? Can we,
Is
yeah,
that addressed though, I think in the proposed change or addition to the articles, it got into hiring and that kind of thing. Would that be addressed under those agreements? Is that where?
Yeah, there'd be that year of transition, just like we do with special ed.
Right.
That special ed teachers were originally employees of their individual districts, and now they're of the SU.
Okay.
And so we work through that with the
So
association.
does the composition of a hiring committee, is that addressed in a collective bargaining agreement, or is that addressed in a district policy?
It's really in policy.
Okay.
And I'm not sure how many schools have non-union staff, but I think the question did come up, what happens to someone who's non-union if once they became part of the merged union? Would they just automatically come under wherever they are, they would end up in that particular union?
Well, as it is now, Dummerston just joined the union for their support staff, and Vernon is not. But we try to mirror those same provisions within the contract. A little difference, between districts, but
Yeah, and we're looking at bringing them into the
yeah,
union.
and I think that makes sense.
It was just a
Regardless of
question
this.
that came up, what if there were non-union staff at the time of the merger?
shall we just pass by Article 4 and Article 5 and go into, is this where you wanna speak, Frank, when we're talking about?
Money?
No,
Okay.
but I think under Article 6, we know we need to get some more language on these, but I think we have to be very clear about the specified funds, including capital funds. Most schools, some schools have much more in their capital funds than others. Some schools have a capital fund, and so I think, in fairness for the transition, we would want to see those funds specified in terms of a capital plan. And then, again, the work of the unified board would be to say, okay, so looking at facilities and thinking about what the needs are, to augment those capital plans that maybe are not sufficient in some schools.
So you're saying to merge the capital fund
No, I'm saying to keep them as specified by
for that
the school building,
specific
let's say,
school?
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Would you do that within the articles itself? Should we have
Yeah,
a line for
I
each
think so.
school? Okay.
Well, no, I think I don't know if it's the specified funds, but, there might be a line that we add about existing capital plans to be maintained.
I would agree, it's not clear what a capital plan is.
Yep.
Sure.
So we need to do a little a little more on that, just to make sure it's clear.
Now, you may recall the last meeting, I had handed out that balance sheet with the capital funds, and there is a fair amount of range. In total, it's 1.2 million across the 6 current districts, and you know, it ranges from Brattleboro Union of 658,000 to Dummerston $1,200, kind of, you know, so a big range there, but there needs, we can associate those reserves with specific capital plans. I think we all have capital plans in our building.
Shall we move on to Article 7? Anything else? Did anyone talk about school property with their boards? Go ahead, Walter.
There was just a question, what if the town, the municipality doesn't want to buy the school, closed school? Will there be some sort of pilot? The question is, will there be a pilot payment as the building is no longer a school? So I guess this is presuming the town will say, we want that building, thank you. And I guess the question was, what if they don't?
I think then the district would
Yeah.
sell it to the bidder.
Okay.
I would
Yeah,
assume.
that's
That would
typical.
be the-
Yep, disposition of asset usually is a bid process.
Okay.
And or there could be a lease option too, that's not unusual.
Okay.
An example would be Twin Valley, where they left the Wilmington site, and they've had it on the market for a couple of years, and somebody has just purchased it at a pretty reasonable price.
Okay. Article 8. Anything, do you have anything about this, Ron? Or?
Yep.
All right. You do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so Frank and I had a conversation with Chris Leopold today, and I got all these notes. Essentially, he's saying, and when we get to the warning article, we can bring it up there as well, but, so the prospective board members would take out petitions, I think, based on the dates that we were looking at, something like May 2nd, they would be available. And what we were trying to do is create a balance in terms of the first year, second year, 3-year terms. And so I don't have a final draft for this to share, but I'll just read it across. If you look at the top of page 9, where it has Brattleboro first, there'd be a 1-year term for Brattleboro. Are we on the same?
No, I'm on March 31st.
All right, so go to your page that has.
Bottom of 8.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, okay, bottom of 8. So you got Brattleboro, you'd have 1-year term. You'd go over to a 3-year term, so that would stay the same. Dummerston, you would move over to a 3-year term, and I'll explain that after I plug them in. Guilford, you go to a 2-year term, as they are. Putney, you'd have a 3-year term. Vernon, you'd have a 2-year term initially, so that changes. The at-large would be a 1-year and a 2-year.
Yeah.
And his rationale for this is you want to balance it out across those years, so you'd have 2 reps with a 1-year term, you'd have 3 with 2-year terms, you'd have 3 with 3-year terms. So that type of balance will be important, that as you go out, it's almost like the Union High School now. Not everyone in the board is up for re-election every year, and it creates a good balance. So,
Could you repeat that, because I didn't catch all of it.
well, the last point I was saying is by spreading it out this way, it creates a good balance. So after a 3-year period, it's not like all the board of directors are up at the same time.
No, the chart, I missed the chart.
Brattleboro 1 year and a 3-year.
Dummerston.
A 3-year. Guilford a 2-year. I think it said
Putney at 3.
3.
Vernon at 2.
Vernon a 2, and then the 2 at large, a 1 and a 2.
Yep.
Is that for both the MUD and the SD? Because some of those towns, if it's a MUD, aren't gonna.
It is the same, because, as an example, we've been talking about, let's say Vernon. So we learned this early on with this configuration, that Vernon would still have a rep on this board, because they would be a separate K-6 entity that would not have discussion on other K-6 matters, but they would have discussion on the 7 through 12 unified grades.
So does that mean that a town that opted out would still be able to vote for the at-large representatives?
Yes.
Any discussion, further discussion on this?
Well, I know at our meeting, our town reps were concerned about the configuration and the lack of representation potentially for Brattleboro. They were very concerned.
What about your board?
I don't know
Our
if
board was
everybody
open
has,
to
yeah,
listening to the town reps.
but yeah. But yeah, it is a concern. It was vocalized by a couple of people there.
Ron, in instances where, when you vote now on a complete budget, that would be for the supervisory district, a K through 12 budget, how does, we'll just use Vernon as an example, if they're only there for 7 through 12, how?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'd have to look at what's contained in the upper grade budget as opposed to the elementary.
Yeah.
That's what the AOE is saying. It's complicated, but the way to accomplish representation of the Vernon public in the process of that secondary education is to have a pull-out segment of the K-12 budget that says we're isolating, the amount of resources that are dedicated to those grade levels, and the Vernon in that example would have input, along with the other board members on a proportional vote.
Any further discussion on this right now? Vote on articles in new board. Let's skip over something. Shall we talk about the petition and the timing now?
Yep, we could.
Do you want to talk us through that, Ron?
This is a pretty simple article. And I think it might have to be more detailed than this, but at least for purposes of discussion tonight. I think there might be some extras that we can.
Yeah, those should head out with those guys. So this is for a June 28th vote right now.
Yeah, right. So maybe there's not too many extras.
Is that enough?
So essentially, it's the same it's very similar to language as in Article 1 of the study committee report, my page 5. Shall a majority of town school districts vote to approve the merger? Question. If one or two districts vote no, a modified unified union school district will be formed pursuant to the provisions of Act 156 of 2012. In such event, the MUD will be named Wyndham Southeast Unified School District. Now, we know that there'll have to be a breakdown of every town in this, but that's the basic article, and so it'll be the legal voters of Brattleboro, the legal voters of Dummerston, Guilford, Putney, Vernon, some language like that. Essentially, that's the basic article.
Any thoughts?
It's pretty understandable.
Yes.
I mean,
And just as an example, we met with the town clerks, just in terms of respect to them, because of the timing of this, to make sure that they're clear that if we're looking, and we probably should at some point soon go over
Yeah.
the timeframe, but to make sure that if we're talking about this spring, that they're clear about what we're gonna be giving them. So, I thought that was a good meeting, just to give them a heads up and get their input. And Barb has since met with Annette Cappy from Brattleboro to draft petitions for board member petitions. And so those would be certainly ready by May 2nd. And I would say by the April 27th meeting, we would have those to share.
Did any of the town clerks have any big concerns or issues?
No, they just understood that there would be forums as we've planned. There has to be a public information meeting within 10 days of the vote in each town. So that's, that's all part of the statutory regulations and these sorts of things. And they understood that.
Richard?
Does the article also need to indicate if we name a town necessary? Because right now it says 1 or 2 districts. I know it makes it more confusing, but does it say, if, for example, Brattleboro is necessary, does it say 1 or 2 and if?
My sense is it does, but, we didn't get that from.
Okay.
From Chris?
Yeah. And again, I mean, here's a sample from, and I'm not gonna pass it around, but just to show you where it has kind of similar information about where the vote is in each town on the particular day. And this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 district town. It's got the article. And then it has some other information here, which I'm not sure would be part of this, but that's the sort of detail that we're gonna have to
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
confirm.
Should we go over this list now?
I think it makes sense.
Can I ask a question? There's no requirement for language if 3 districts vote no, what happens?
I think it does.
But it doesn't say that here. I mean, it's 1 or 2, but there's no, normally it's yes, this happens, no, this happens. Now we have yes, this happens, no, 1, this happens, 2 no's, this happens, 3 no's, this happens. I'm just wondering if there needs to be some language that,
Another sentence that says if 3 or more towns vote no,
Yes,
the article
exactly.
doesn't pass.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's not necessarily true, because if Brattleboro voted no,
Yeah.
it wouldn't go.
Oh, right.
Well, right, so there's that.
Yeah, so I don't
Option
think
two.
I don't think you can identify it that way.
But I think if folks who haven't followed along read this, they think there are 2 options.
Right.
Maybe it's different in Vernon than in the others, and maybe there's no way we'll get more than 2 to vote no, or even more than 1, I just don't know. But there's no clear, if someone says, well, I wonder what happens if 3 districts vote no, there's no information on what happens. And I would just say for folks, I know you can't put everything in an article, but this is a complicated article for sure, because I think it's a complicated vote. So just wondering.
I think it's a question for Chris, because I do get concerned that maybe it would make things muddy for an article language.
But as it
What about just
stands-
a sentence on, another sentence on the end that says, if 3 towns or the town of Brattleboro vote no, the merger shall not be approved.
This is what will pass by Chris.
Yeah. As it stands, it's not a model of clarity, this article.
Chris has written these for,
It could be
So-
clarified. I
we don't need, yes, we've already talked about sending it back to Chris for some cleanup. So, right now, I'm sorry, I wish we had a Xerox of this, but it's sort of can we possibly
Yes, I can.
Xerox it?
Yep.
Okay, maybe I'll wait for a sec till Lyle gets to do that for us. And this is very much a draft. Well, I think it's a pretty clean draft, but this is the election calendar that we're gonna talk about. Local input on policy and budget development. I think we talked about that last time. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm the language to be considered portion of this about rotating the meetings. I think rotating the meetings is a good idea. But I question whether in the articles of agreement, we should be dictating what a future board decides, where a future board decides to hold its meetings.
Well, if you're saying you're gonna rotate, that's amongst towns, I mean, you're just saying it's gonna rotate. It's not saying every third one it's gonna be in.
I know, it seems like a bit of an overreach for this document. I'm not saying it's a bad idea for that board to decide to do. I just don't know that here we should be doing that ahead of time and telling the future board.
I think it was
detail.
I think it was addressing concerns that people would have to travel to one place specifically all the time. And it was a way to make folks more comfortable that, you know, it would be assured to be in their community at some point.
I think especially for the smaller towns, that
Yeah.
It's important
it's
to.
important to have something.
I think that's the only reason I was doing it.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's
Yeah.
a bad idea.
Yeah.
No.
Shall we talk about leadership councils now? Is there anything from Tom's proposals that you wanna address now or put in here?
When I read through it, I thought a lot of it, like Ron already pointed out, we already do by per master agreement or law. I did have concerns with some of the particulars about curriculum and program development and budget allocation. Just that we might be violating some existing laws or agreements, so that was my only concern. You know, if we use any of the language in here, we wanna make sure that it abides by existing master agreements and law, so we don't incur problems.
Alice, just to let you know, no, I know Ian received it, but nobody else on the Brattleboro board received this email, which, Tom's email.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I
So-
tried.
Well,
None of
she
us-
said it was the
none of
study
it-
committee.
Yeah, no, but Jill wasn't on it,
I was on it.
yeah. Ricky's not on it.
It
Oh, I
really,
wish I'd known that, I'm so sorry.
really, those types of things should go to Barb.
I sent them the emails.
Yeah, I gave
Barb
him the list.
forwarded it
That may
to
have
me.
been me not getting the list, complete list to you.
Yeah, it says, you know,
This is yours, right?
Or did you send it to individuals? Is that what you did?
I have a copy.
Yeah, this, I can send mine.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Did you send it? Did you
Pass
send
it on
it?
down.
No, I just had Beth email it to me,
Yeah.
but it just, you know,
So we should
wasn't able to review it beforehand.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Alice, do you want me to respond to any, like, to Amy's question?
I don't know.
Well, let's see if, who didn't get a copy of this email with suggestions? At least two people?
I'm the only one who's not technically astute. I'm still on fire. So if
Yeah.
you could,
I just sent it to you.
oh,
I'll
never
send
mind,
it
I
to
guess I
Jill
have it,
too.
there's something not here.
Do you want a hard copy?
If
Or
you
do you
have an extra,
wanna-
that would be.
I mean,
Well,
we
I
will-
can give it to you, so.
We will be talking about this at the next meeting too.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Does somebody else
Appreciate
need one?
I'd prefer to talk about leadership councils when we're all on the same page. I'm wondering if maybe we should,
that. That's not this page.
yeah, it's not that big. So
Can
why
I
don't we,
Can I just make one note that doesn't have to
Yeah.
do with the
Yeah.
extra things, just in general, we have the list of bullet points.
Mhm.
I was thinking maybe we should add some language to state that these are not exclusive of other things that they may be asked to do. That the board could add more responsibilities and I'm not saying this well. You know what I mean.
We'll have,
It's not an all-inclusive list.
we'll have numerous responsibilities, including the following.
Yes.
Yeah,
The part that I really liked is the idea, and I think I was envisioning this happening anyway, but looking back at what we've drafted, it may not be spelled out as I thought. is the idea of the unique culture of each of the schools, which we do address, but you know, the decision to focus a certain portion of the day on farm to school might be a school-specific choice at one school and not at another. And I think as this used language, you know, the decision to offer a Chinese class and I guess those.
This is in Tom's.
In Tom, yeah, so Tom, I think specifically called out the Chinese class, but I was thinking farm to school, the gardening, that kind of thing that we do at Guilford, and that decision I just assumed would still be Guilford's to make, but I don't know how explicit we are in it, or how to phrase that, but that's what, one of the things I picked up in Tom's is maybe we need to be a little more explicit that our intent is that would continue to be the school's choice to dedicate time to those specific programs.
Does anyone have a suggestion of how to phrase that? I mean, is there, and again, I don't wanna dig too much into this, cause not everyone has read this suggestion.
You're talking about that, this side of, let's see.
It should be relatively easy to come up with some type of terminology that
Yeah.
says each school is allowed a certain amount of discretionary time that is not necessarily choreographed by the district.
Right.
Or to that effect.
But there's the question of what if there's a cost associated with that particular.
That's been drilled down a long time. I'm not sure, yeah, it's a good question to that.
Well, that's, at that point, if you know that you're involved in a specific, non-traditional project, you're gonna build that into your, budget with the administrative. I mean, if my administrator knows that this program is very valuable to our sense of community, that's where you gotta put a little bit of money. And I think that's key, is the leadership committee advocating that, and I think it would work very appropriately.
Well, then, by allowing a certain amount of discretionary time, perhaps you can just allow a discretionary budget for each of the schools as well, so that all schools would have equity in the amount of money to spend on their discretionary projects.
Is it? Hold on, Kim, and then.
I mean, I think each school will probably still continue to maintain their own PTOs as well, which I know our schools, the PTOs do different things. You know, which, so that it could also be facilitated that way as well.
Allotting a little bit more
Depending
money.
depending on the program and how much.
your PTO
Right.
fundraises for different.
Ian?
Isn't this already in our initial bullet points on the section that gives leadership council authority over specific practices and procedures? I think one of those included is school-based activities.
Yeah. I think that's why we put it in.
Just written out in long form, that's all.
Yeah.
I'm teasing.
I know, but I want to respond, but I don't want to.
I just want to add, Ron, with some of the material that we went through that you talked about is already in policy. Given that it's already in policy, is it then inappropriate to put it into the agreement, or is it taken for granted that way? Because I really liked some of the material that we talked about in terms of hiring practices and having that articulated, even if it's already a policy that we follow.
Yeah, I mean, you could cite the policy, I wouldn't put the policy in here.
Okay.
Cite the policy at the end, you mean?
Well, I'm just thinking about, again, for the reasons that Tom brought up, and I don't want to go, I know not everyone's read it, but that if there are things that that already is in policy and that we take for granted that we already do, does that mean that we shouldn't, I'm wondering if in making this agreement, we should articulate some of those items that would be important to all of us to see it.
Yeah,
just to see
at
it.
the end, right, and see policy,
Like
whatever
right,
number.
right, and then append it, that would be
In
great.
accordance with, and I think that would satisfy a lot of our
Yeah.
feelings.
A list of references used.
Yeah.
Or areas
Is that a
where.
question? Can I answer that
Yeah.
question?
Yeah.
This is an attempt to write into the Articles of Agreement some of those understandings. The dilemma is that when you say, this is what we do now, this is what we do now, the "we" is your local school boards. They cease to exist. What you're gonna have 3 or 4 or 5 years after the consolidation is gonna be extremely different from what you have now. You now have a venue for making those decisions. You have a platform for that kind of discussion. The leadership councils, as you have them written, are advisory. They're not decision-making, they're advisory. They are what feels to somebody on the outside like a token gesture, like throwing a bone to the dog. This is not, right now, school boards have decision-making capability about budget, decision-making capability about who they hire, decision-making capability about hiring a principal. That's not what you have in the leadership councils. What you have in the leadership councils is, well, when it's convenient, we'll ask the local schools what they would like. It's a,
So excuse me, I
Yeah.
would bet that almost everyone at this table would disagree with you on that. I would.
then,
I don't wanna speak
then
for
show me in the
everybody.
articles where it says it. Because I'll
Does
happily
anyone,
back
do we
off.
wanna respond, engage?
I think that if not everyone has had a chance to review this, I think we should return to it once we have it.
So I think you have the emails that I gave you. So let's go, you and I review those so that we make sure that you send those out.
Can you
so-
get a list of who didn't get them, so that I don't?
Sounds like the
overload
Brattleboro
people?
folks.
Should
didn't
it go
get
to
them.
Barb? It should all.
It shouldn't be, it shouldn't go, it's not something that's coming from, it shouldn't come from Barb.
Okay.
Yeah, so it would be the Brattleboro members
Yeah.
of this.
I mean, I just forwarded to Mark and to Jill.
Okay.
I don't know if I have Ricky's email,
Okay.
On my phone.
Well, the emails are all on your website.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're all on the.
I know I remember your name, I remember including it, I thought you had gotten it, it just evidently got lost in the ethers.
Yeah, and it could
There's
have
that
gone.
Could've gone for
possibility.
Spain or something.
I'll blame my cats for stepping on a keyboard.
But, yeah,
I mean, I just wanted, before we went off of Article 12, I know that one of our principals at our meeting, he was concerned in terms of having the chair being somebody that wasn't a Brattleboro resident and not having, the background and the feel for the schools, and make, so I wanted to voice that concern.
Yeah, and I thought about that, even at that time, that, I think we stated, so if you only had 2 Brattleboro board members, then those board members are gonna have to serve on 2 committees, 2 leadership councils. It's much like BUHS board members that serve on, the Career Center Advisory Committee, the BAMS Committee, the Policy Committee, so.
Given that, I was thinking about this when we had a conversation about the workload of the person who now is on this board. And so maybe the language should change that group then elects a chair among itself, one of those representatives, whoever it is that's from the board that is now represented to the leadership council, may be the chair, but it may not be the chair. Because I think you're right, it's important that the person who chairs that committee be affiliated with that, or identified with that particular school.
Right, have a vested interest.
And
Because I know, Putney wouldn't want
Right.
somebody
Exactly.
from another town
Yeah.
running. It wouldn't matter what town.
Right, and if
You
the
know.
group itself did its own voting, you already have a group that's been voted by the town
Right.
to be part of that leadership council, one of them can be the chair. And it takes a little bit of responsibility, or a little bit of work away from the person who's on the board.
Ian, did you have something?
Oh, no, I
Or you
just,
okay. Okay, so let's table this and
So somebody
yeah.
provide me language for that?
Are we good? No, I wasn't sure, does
I
everyone
think
agree with that?
Everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
So give us some language and we can
Okay,
put it
Richard's
in
gonna do
and
that?
see.
I'll do it.
Okay, so, this is obviously something that we should all be talking about our boards about a great deal. Can we go back to the calendar?
Okay. Before we go on,
Yeah, well, Lyle's, we're passing it around. Oh.
it came up in our meeting as well, the point about having a student present
Yeah.
as part of that meeting. And I wasn't sure if that, again, given that we're a K-8 school, there was concern about who would then serve and then what would be appropriate for an 8th grader, even if it were an 8th grader, to be on that leadership council. And so there was some concern expressed about that.
Yeah, we talked about that in Vernon and whether a 6th grader. And my sense is there are certain functions of that committee that you'd really want to get student input, and there's probably other things that, you know, you'd excuse the student from.
Maybe it's a student advisor.
Yeah.
Student.
It's kind of like the student council
Yeah.
reps that come to the WHS board meetings. There's certain aspects of the meetings that they contribute to and other times that they don't.
Would they be listed as a member, or would they be listed as just our contact if we had a student issue? Because I mean, I don't know if we would want to ask a 6th grader to come to all of these
Right, that was the other one
meetings.
first.
Right.
A student representative.
Yeah. That then we could, if there was a specific issue relating to a student matter, we could invite them to come to that meeting, but rather than
Yeah.
kind of list them as a member where they would be expected to be at all of them.
Or they could be listed, they could come if they wanted to, though.
Right, yes, yeah.
So we can work on that language.
Yeah.
Do you wanna work on that, Beth? Language on that?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, she does, look at her.
Okay, so let's look at this, that's all, can we keep going?
Yep.
So this is something Barb worked on with, after her meeting, she had a couple meetings. Do you wanna talk us through this, or shall I?
No, I think we.
So, we're looking for a June 28th vote, if we go forward as we certainly might. Monday, May 2nd, so, well, let's see. So, at the end of April, on the 25th, we're gonna, hopefully most of us are gonna meet at BUHS at 9:30 in the morning, so we need to talk about that. But then BUHS has a meeting on the 2nd, that's their board meeting. Then we have a meeting on May 3rd. So, I don't know if we wanna actually switch that, Ron, to have it on the 2nd, but we can talk about that. I don't know if we wanna stick with the May 3rd. But right now we have a study committee on the 3rd. On May 2nd,
Well, prior to that, we
Yeah.
have a meeting on the 27th.
correct, yes.
That's gonna be a key
Okay,
meeting.
so let's assume we're doing most of the voting on this on April 27th. Then on May 2nd, the petitions will be available in all town offices. The petitions which, do we have the language, we do have the language for the petition or no?
No, for the
Okay.
board members,
Yeah.
they're in draft form, so I don't have them tonight.
Okay.
But you will.
So that's for 2 positions, right? Well, the at-large and then the individual towns.
Right.
Then on Thursday, so this will be available at that point. Then on Thursday, May 19th is the first day to post warning for town school district. So that's 40 days, not more than 40. May 19th to the 23rd, there's the board meeting and or special meetings to sign the warnings. I think we've talked about having one meeting where we do all that. All of the boards get together in one spot and just do it.
So that would be in conjunction with the WSESU board meeting, and then we can have the boards meet at the same time.
This is the 23rd?
I think we actually
We may have scheduled.
identified a time.
Do you have a?
Yeah, May 23rd. We're hoping that Vernon could host us.
May 23rd?
It's a Monday.
So do they have to be signed by the 23rd, or do they have to be in,
I think we
into
have
the
to be
state?
signed.
Okay. That same day is the last day to file the petition?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
If one were to do the at-large, so you need 60 signatures, do all those signatures have to be from one town?
No.
Then who checks the legitimacy of the signatures? Because when you petition in Guilford, the Guilford clerk goes through the checklist, make sure that all the names are people that are registered to vote in the town of Guilford.
We could probably distribute that to each clerk.
Oh, each clerk would get the whole. I see.
So
So
the
you would
Guilford
bring-
people would be checked by Guilford, Brattleboro by Brattleboro clerk.
You would bring
Where
it back
would
to
we-
your town clerk,
You bring it back.
and then
to
your
town.
town clerk would distribute it.
I see.
We talked about that with the town
Yeah.
clerks, and they all were very comfortable with it. How it, you know. Sunday, May 29th is the last day to post the warning for school town district meeting. And then Wednesday, the 8th, early ballots available. The 18th, Saturday, the 18th is the last day to post sample ballots and voter information. The Wednesday, the 22nd, last day to register to vote. And then the 27th, voters may request early ballots until 5 o'clock. Then the vote is on the 28th. And then July 8th is the last day for a candidate for local office to file the request for recount. Okay? Any questions by you guys? Yeah.
The petitions, they're going to be available for us to pick up May 2nd. They're being prepared starting now? So since we haven't finalized our decision on what the makeup of the board is going to be, are they preparing petitions for both possible scenarios?
What those, which two scenarios?
Well, we have the at-large is what we're looking at now, but it seems like there's still a lot of uncertainty about that. So what if we decide to go back to the 5+4?
We still have time to do that. I mean, that language is pretty, that's been written before, so
Okay.
we have time to do that.
Can I ask a question about the timeline?
Yeah.
The law is very clear that it's during the annual school board meeting. Have you gotten word that somehow it doesn't have to be?
What?
The law says any school district that is so voted at its annual school district meeting, not a special. And, I mean, I'm reading it.
It's
Has
not-
somebody said to you that the state, that's not accurate?
Right.
No, Chris hasn't addressed it.
If you didn't do it during your regular town meeting, warned it for that, you have to have a special town meeting each time.
Well, ask your friend Leopold.
He has.
Yeah.
Paragraph 261, B1, and following.
We have talked about this.
We have, and it's cool.
That's what we're being
Yeah.
told.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, usually, I mean, it's pretty common.
All right, guys. Do you wanna?
Poor Christina.
I couldn't see this one. All right, so shall we move on? Yeah.
Just to clarify something,
Yeah.
so on Monday, April 27th, which I think is our next meeting, that's when we will officially decide on 5 and 4, or 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, et cetera. All of
Yeah.
that will be
I would
funded.
say so. I mean, I think we'll have a lot to talk about and to get through.
But if the petitions have to be ready on the 2nd, I mean, certainly some votes have to be done on the 27th. And I would request that the question of the 1 or 2,
We have to
would
decide
be on
about
the
that.
27th, yeah.
And I think, yeah,
Okay.
and you guys need to go back to your boards and keep talking about these things. So after tonight, you really do need to take responsibility, and I know you already have, but I'm reiterating it, but our time is running out for meeting reports. Since we're actually talking about schedule before it gets lost, can several of us, if not all of us, meet with those folks at BUHS on 9:30 on Monday, the 25th?
25th of April?
It would be 9:30. Yeah.
I don't think you'll have anything there.
Where are we doing that? The Marlboro Tech Center? Is that where I?
I think it's BUHS.
Is it now?
So I can be there.
Yep.
I mean, I'm gonna be there. I'll figure out when to be there.
What is that for?
Hmm?
What is that for?
What is it for?
Yeah.
So, Donna Russo Savage, Brad would be able to sit with the study committee.
Is that a public meeting?
I don't, it depends on how many of us are available to be there. I would imagine that it is a public meeting, but
It
I
is?
don't, I would imagine, but I'm not telling you for sure yet. It would, if it is a public meeting, it will be posted as such. We're gonna figure out right now. You can come?
I can go, sure.
Okay, Frank, you're gonna be there? I think you've
Yep.
been slotted.
I will not be there.
Okay, anyone from Vernon? Can we get, if you can't be there, can you try, reach out to
Yeah,
Matt?
I will check in with Matt after tonight,
Okay.
see what he's up to.
Okay, so what I guess I would like is if folks could email me individual, I'm going out of town on Friday, but if you could email me tomorrow, I think I know who can definitely be there, but email me if there's any question. Email me, so you, I would imagine that Jill might be able to be there.
She should be able to, yes.
Um,
I cannot guarantee that, but
If you two from Guilford can't come, and if you can you guys talk about that? All right. And then I will contact Barb and see about warning, what's the appropriate thing to do. Okay? Does this make sense? Yes?
Yep.
It'll be like an hour, 9:30 to 10:30. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Right, Frank. Can we, this would be a good time, I
Sure.
think.
Okay. So a little more financial information. Go ahead and pass those around. Let me make sure it's on the back. Yeah, good. Those are good to go.
Potentially 28?
yes.
Okay, so this is just a continuation of the financial information that we have been developing over the course of our study. So this is a double-sided document. The document that has a title WSESU Consolidated Financial Statement. It's got more details, a lot more numbers on this document. That's data you've seen before, so it's a little different format in that I've brought together the revenue, the expense, the proportional of spending by the way in which we're organized to deliver instruction and so on. And then at the very bottom of that sheet is equalized students, spending per student, and tax rates. So as they say, over the last several weeks I have distributed this in other forms. The reason why I put it on the back of this document in what's new information for you is this other side. Did you need a copy, Mr. Wood? Is an estimated school tax rate if we unified under the present budget. So this is something we talked about at the Brattleboro Town Act 46 Forum. It's intended to illustrate and address some of the questions that have been raised about, well, how will individual towns go from where they are today to this unified system if it was to come together under a vote. Couple of things to keep in mind. I've used fiscal year 16 and I have not had to make any assumptions. These are all board approved budgets, legislative approved indices, and these are actual tax rates that we're using today. You're paying them, I'm paying, or not, I'm paying them up north.
I'm paying them.
You're paying them. So that's a significant benefit for, not having to make a bunch of assumptions. But hopefully you recognize, I'll go through this quickly. Hopefully you recognize that first number on the page there, first column, 57 million. That's what we've talked about before. It's where the data comes from on the reverse side. It says if you just added up all of our approved budgets in our general operating funds, we're 57 million current fiscal year. The objective here is to illustrate a unified tax rate versus where we are today individually. So the way we get to a unified rate would be, if we voted this in June and we formed a union, this is the way we would calculate the new union tax rate, and this should be quite familiar to all of you that work with your school district budgets. It's the same methodology. Okay, there's no difference. Take your spending, subtract what we call Act 68 education or less Act 68 revenue. That's primarily special education aid. It would be at the Brattleboro Union High School. It would be tuition income. So wherever we have sources of revenue that are not the state aid that comes from the education fund, you subtract that from spending, and we get this education spending. So that's a net number. We divide our total number of students. If you're Guilford, it would be 155 kids. If you're a unified system, it's 2,659 kids. We divide our net spending, line 3, by our kids, and we get 16,005 per student. And then the state gives us a number every year that we compare to. 9,459 is the current year. That creates a factor. Simple division, 16,502 divided by 9,459 is a factor of 1.745. If the state had announced $1 as a statewide tax rate, that's our tax rate. This year they said it's going to be 99 cents. So you multiply the $1.74 by 99 cents and you get $1.72. That's our tax rate. That would be our tax rate as a unified system. That's the way we've calculated all the tax rates in the individual towns. That's the way every school district in the state of Vermont calculates the school tax rate. Now, if any of this is news to anyone, you can see why cost per student is so important when you get to setting school property tax rates. Now going from line 9, if we were accelerated merger and we passed the vote, we would take off this 10-cent incentive. We talked a lot about that, and that would give us $1.62. Now, when you go down to these other lines, 27, 28, 29, you can pick your town. First town, Brattleboro town, line 27. We're currently, the pre-K through 12 tax rate is $1.71. You see that's higher. In any case, the tax rates are higher than this accelerated merged system with this 10-cent incentive. In some instances, without the incentive, our current tax rates in a town are a little bit less, and of course, some are a little bit more. But they all, as essentially a weighted average, they represent this $1.72. The other set of data at the bottom, going with line 33 through line 38, is the percent difference. So this is the reduction in taxes that each town would see if this law had gone in and retrospectively been in place this year, fiscal year 16. So Brattleboro town would be paying 5% less, or 8.3 cents. And for folks that don't deal with tax rates, when you're looking at these numbers, if you imagined a $100,000 house, just turn a 1.711 into a $1,711. That's how you translate tax rates into the check you have to cut as a homeowner without income sensitivity. So applying those same Principals, 0.083 is $83. In Dummerston, 0.166 is $166 per $100,000 of assessed tax value for the school property tax. So if you have a $300,000 house, then it's 3 times that number. Those are the differentials. So that's the first column of data. The second column of data, where it says scenario A at the top, that represents what we've talked about with the PICA study and looking at what a unified system would allow us to do in terms of staffing. We provided you with data, the study committee with data that showed over time, we're not making a claim that we take a vote and all of a sudden we can change our staffing ratios the next day or even the next year. But that data that we reviewed showed a $2 million reduction if we followed the PICA study recommendations on staffing. And that did not include special ed or the paraeducators. We felt that there was such a difference in the PICA study basis and what our current practice is that no sense in addressing that now, but I'm just saying that in that the PICA study would have had us reduce staff a lot more if we went down that road. So what I've illustrated here in scenario A with Ron is not a 2 million number, but a 1%. If we said, well, we think we could implement a 1% reduction based on all of those analyses that we have discussed around shared use of resources, then you see the same calculations as far as how do you get to a tax rate. It takes spending minus revenue divided by kids equals the tax rate. So we would go down the 2 cents, which is a $20 amount on a $100,000 house. You bring those numbers down to the same comparative statistics as to, well, what does that look like against what we're paying today, and you see that there's similar numbers. They're a little bit higher savings, 6% in Brattleboro town, 10% in Dummerston, and so on. A couple of other things I'll just mention, and then glad to try to answer questions. So we started with this analysis early in the study committee's review, and it was that financial model. So the financial model didn't get into this level of detail. It just said we're going to use a few generic assumptions, and the thing that this doesn't do is it doesn't remove the benefits that Guilford gets, that Dummerston gets in the form of the small schools grant. So for example, you see that Guilford has the lowest tax rate on this page on line 29. But Guilford gets $41,000 in small schools grant in the 16 budget. So that goes away under the Act 46 if you're not part of a union. So we talked about that, and that's what that financial model quantified. So I haven't done that, but just you can do that. You can make a note if you want, but that's 4 cents. So if Guilford didn't get their $41,000, that tax rate would be up 4 cents. Instead of $1.69, it would be $1.73. You can see that's higher than the current $1.727. And Dummerston is the same situation. Right now, Dummerston has the highest tax rate of $1.79. Well, it would be 3 cents higher if the small schools grant wasn't available.
Do we get a small schools
You get
grant?
34,000 in small schools grant.
No, we do.
So those are the nuances of moving forward and having to deal with other variables that I haven't dealt with. Things like this provision of 2,659 students. Well, actually, we don't have that many students. There's this provision, they call it a ghost student, or they call it a phantom student, where when enrollment drops greater than 3.5%, they're saying, well, we're not going to take those kids away from you because we know how disruptive that is on a tax rate, so we're going to give you credit for more kids than you actually have just to ease the burden, but we're going to make you use up your unaccounted for students over time. So that's again what that financial model did. You know, I didn't get into those nuances in this analysis, but those are the things that make staying separate under Act 46, this new law, a lot more expensive. So Walter, as you were asking from Ron's first comments on the status quo, those are some of those additional costs, and it's additional tax impact. It's not actually, in that example, checks that Vernon would cut as a expense. It's a higher cost of doing business from a tax rate point of view, because you lose some protection, or you lose revenue. So that's it.
Thanks. Can I ask a question? Where does CLA figure into all this?
So CLA is unique to each town, so it would not be appropriate to try to use comparative data.
Okay.
But good point, Amy, because if any of you went back to your tax bill that's at home, you're paying on a CLA adjusted rate. These are the equalized rates.
Okay.
But that is the one thing that stays unique in a unified system is you got one tax rate, but everybody has their own CLA based on what's happening in real estate markets in your town and who's appraised, what town is appraised or reappraised according to market.
So, but in general, like Dummerston's increased slightly, so if we were to use this, then we know that most likely this rate would be influenced by the CLA and drop a little bit more, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, if your CLA has gone up, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Questions?
Maybe one last
Yeah.
quick point is, I use the example of $500,000, 1%. You can see that has a 2-cent impact. That was a point of interest, I think, as the study committee was considering these program expansion costs, adding foreign language, adding art. How can Guilford add after-school program if it costs $20,000? We did the math on how many kids and all of that sort of thing. Just giving you the point of reference that both ways, if you take away $500,000, it's 2 cents. If you add $500,000, it's 2 cents. On a unified system, $500,000 on any one of your individual budgets is an enormous increase in a tax rate, and that's the sort of thing that we said is the benefit for the unified system from a financial point of view.
Quick question about the
Quick.
10 cents. So if the 10 cents, is it available if there's a mud? I
No,
thought
it's 8
it's
cents.
8 cents it's a mud. And then, and also scenario A doesn't take into account any costs of merger. I remember Donna Rousseau, no, who was it? Secretary Holcomb said that she anticipated some increased costs. Have you estimated those?
So there's a $140,000 grant that's made available to purchase a new accounting system that needs to be formed. There's a number of transition costs. So that is factored in from the point of view that there's new revenue as well to assist with that. And it's also part of a very conservative savings where, the $500,000, 1%, as we've talked in the study committee, we think that there's more than that available through a collaborative system.
I mean, when you compare our special ed consolidation, which accounts for about 20% of our budget, we save $300,000. So I think $500,000 is pretty reasonable to expect.
Jody, and then I think, as long as it works for the study committee, you're gonna show something to us.
Yeah.
Well, what about the income sensitivity aspect of this? Because I know there's Dummerston's like 50% or 60% gets income sensitivity. So how does that figure into this?
So they have the same benefit. It's a different calculation, but the premise is the same in that everybody who is subject to income sensitivity starts at 2%. Okay? So that means if Dummerston spent this $9,459 per student, then you're right at the 2%. So if you make $50,000 household income, you're going to pay 2% or $1,000 in school property tax. So but Dummerston spends $17,000 a student. So when we do this ratio, the same way you calculate its tax rate, take your Dummerston spending per student divided by this approximately 10,000, you get this factor, same factor to calculate the tax rate of 1.74. You multiply that times the 2%. That would bring you up to about 3.5%. So to answer your question, the more a district spends, the higher the percentage you're subject to pay on your income. So instead of paying 2% of 50,000, you're going to pay 3.5% of 50,000. So that's about $1,800, not $1,000, $1,800. So the point is as the spending per student declines, and that's what we see is likely under a unified system, the factor lowers and you get closer to the 2%, and it is a very similar impact. This $20, this 2 cents or $20 per 100,000, it's a very similar impact to the income earner, the $50,000 income earner. If we drop the tax rate, as in this illustration, from $1.72 to $1.70, they're going to see that same $20 savings. So it is a shared benefit, and as you say, most folks in most towns pay on income sensitivity as opposed to property tax because the property tax is higher.
I question that, Frank. I'm not sure, because if you're paying on income, it has nothing to do with the tax rate.
That's right. That's right. So what they do is they say...
I understand that the income sensitivity percentage would go up based on school spending.
Right.
I understand that.
That's the core of the calculation.
Yeah.
That's what happens at the tax department when folks file their return.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same calculation. It's just at the end of the day, it's that if you own property and you make $50,000, which means you're subject to income sensitivity, anything less than about $100,000, you're subject to income sensitivity. Then at the end of the day, the tax department looks at what is the calculated tax rate times your property value, and if that happened to be $1.70 on 100,000, that's $1,700. And then they're going to say, what's the calculated income sensitivity liability, and then you're going to pay the lower. And that's the way that works.
Okay. So we're going to do a thank you. That's good.
So what we wanted to do, and it's about a 10-minute PowerPoint. What we'd like to do is show you the PowerPoint that was generated first in Guilford, updated in Brattleboro. We've done a few tweaks to it. And I think this can serve as a really good, consistent message that towns can use when you have forums. Now, so what I'm showing you.
So there's a
screen.
Old-fashioned screen.
Was that the, you got the, because there is another one in there. I don't notice.
Whichever way you want to do it.
It doesn't matter to me. Probably won't work. Folks
It
just
works
say-
here if people just have to.
Glad you're calling that.
Not be in the
This is
light
my
of.
trip to Disneyland.
And I was hoping to get a quick.
Did you want to do the clicking?
I can.
Yeah, if it's easy for you, but I don't know if they got the right plug for you.
Oh, yeah, you're right. You're right.
Is that good for you? Oh, good.
So I'm set. I had a big bell solo in there tonight, so I had to eat before
If you see any water back there, I'd love to. Water? Water. Oh, the word got out. Let's see. It's on the website. Did that do anything for you? Okay, good. Yeah. It's the it's Act 46. You're gonna see it in just a second. Yeah, we can get it. We'll get it to you.
Do you know?
website, yeah.
Well, I see the group took all the chocolate chips. These are all raisin.
Taboo, thank you though.
Come in late.
Plate of cookies.
Leave early.
Yeah.
The cookies is a good pass.
Well, that was one of my questions.
Are you really taking? Yes. Does that mean we have to share now?
Oh, yeah,
That ain't going.
I don't want one of those peel me a grape pizzas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. No. I'm a cookie monster. Here.
One for.
You don't have to go over that and share.
Yeah. Having to deal with that.
You get a cookie. Oh, well, then pass it on.
Come on, Ron, you can
Get this through it. Give you an itch in your pipe.
Take his name.
Are the cookies all gone?
Did
Did we share them?
We did, we read it all.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I want to make sure that the masses have them.
I had it ready.
Let them eat.
You're up.
This math has.
You've been quiet.
I've been quiet tonight, right?
So, again, Beth put this together initially, so the why there is pretty clear. Shows the enrollment trends over time. A lot of this information is what, you've seen already. The specific schools or the UHS with elementary totals.
And that's what this whole thing's based on.
That's what we've been working on.
There are the charts that Frank has provided.
This is Brattleboro Town pulled out. Sorry, you can't see it.
Cable TV, nothing to do with that.
And there's UHS.
Okay, so the, considering the equity issues, consistent academic programs, academic coaches, teacher leaders, Title I services, extended programs, summer programming, Head Start, students-teacher ratios, financial operation. So all of this is taken from the program overview chart that when we did it early on, kind of identified some of the inequities, and then some of the program expansion concepts. This also was from the program overview, the combined state assessments from the NECAP to the SBAC. You see the state average there, 54% proficiency, and you can see the towns, the schools, and then the poverty rates to the right, again with the state 44% rate.
So you can see some schools that have very high poverty rates that have exceeded the state average by 10%. And, right, we're just,
Yeah, this is was an indicator of increasing costs. So you see, 2005, the state average was 8,900, and our costs were 10,009 for this is cost per equalized student. And then today, we're still significantly higher than the state average, but our poverty is as a system is higher as well. But from a state perspective, this is again with those enrollment charts. It just underscores the problem the state is having with a rapidly escalating cost per student. 40 and 50% increases on a per student basis over a 10-year period, far outstripping inflation and the state's ability to pay. This also illustrates state responding to this situation. The column on the right is cost containment provision. So I'm sure you folks that are working with school budgets are aware, last several years the state puts a threshold in the funding law that says if you spend more than, in this case, 16,166, then you'll be taxed 100% more, a double tax on anything over that. You see that we do have some towns that were over the threshold. Brattleboro Union actually is not paying the tax because the debt is exempt, but some of our other towns like Dummerston were not exempt because you didn't have that a significant amount of debt that's excluded.
so then just the options, accelerated, conventional, ultimate, alternative. So that's that slide that we went over earlier, looking at the other possibilities. So I don't think we just gets into the article. So we left the Vernon concept in there for 10 years. So this is just a shortened version of the no school closure language that we have. This is the proposed board configuration. School-based councils. So this is the, within the elementary, middle school, transfer school choice consideration that we put in the draft the first time last time.
Can I ask a question? It's sort of unrelated, I mean, not necessarily, but overall, how much, the cost drivers in education for this district, I mean, obviously special education is one of them. Poverty, I think, is a huge driver. Is anyone talking to the social services division about maybe what they can help with that kind of expense that
We
are,
teachers are being asked
but-
to do?
You know, the state agencies are so strapped.
I know.
We have
That's why
cases, we've identified 9 families in Academy School and 9 in Green Street that are homeless. We have had a number of situations where we've had to make referrals on students. The agencies don't have places to put students. It's really, I was part of this Marlboro College analysis in terms of thinking about what do we need to do? And people started to talk about the state resources. We need to combine the state resources. And my point was, there aren't enough state resources. It's really federal money that we rely on to some extent.
Is anybody having a conversation with the federal government, our representatives? I mean, is it a topic that gets raised or gets pushed by not only our state but others to get
I
the
believe
federal
it
government
does.
up from 15% to?
Early Ed Services had a huge cut about 3 or 4 years ago, and they've been restored. So they understand the impact that it
But
has.
special education's never been above 15.
And it won't be. You know, I think the state,
Why do
in
you
their
think
wisdom, it was top down, where they did the consolidation. Rebecca Holcomb has reported that every large supervisory union has saved between $300,000 and $600,000 through that consolidation. And I believe in our district, as she had said, providing better services.
So if you can do that as a supervisory union, shouldn't it follow that you could do other things that we're talking about in this consolidation?
But that was with special ed unified, consolidated.
Right.
One employer, as opposed to 7. You know, right now we're 7 employers, and when you have one employer, you can be much more effective and efficient at using your resources to address student needs.
Would you have to consolidate to have that authority?
To be a single employer, you do, yes. Yeah, and as we illustrated with those different tax rates,
Yeah.
you know, for each town, a new teacher means a very different thing when you're a unique town, because you're going to go in to your budget and you're going to compare new spending for that new teacher against your 150 kids or your 200 kids or your 105 kids. That cost per student sets the tax rate for that town, and that's prohibitive. As you saw in the 16,166 threshold, most of our towns are already bumping up against that, or some have exceeded that. So those are the obstacles for remaining independent.
So let me just close this out.
Yeah.
And then, you know, so.
We'll open it
I think
for
that's the
public
last one. Okay, so the advantages, you know, I'm not gonna restate those, but, you know, it's a document that you can see. So we think this is a good document to be able to use for forums. And so, I think obviously we'll make it available for people. And when we start thinking about scheduling the forums, at least this is a consistent message. I think it worked really well in Guilford and certainly in Brattleboro.
And one thing, if I could just follow up on this slide and maybe the next slide, is in Brattleboro, the concern was, and a school board member was saying, yeah, but if we go from separate districts and we're a lower spending district and we unify, well, you know, this is someone from the Brattleboro system saying, and we unify and now we're going to be paying Dummerston's higher tax rate, or we're going to be paying, because we're going to pay in this proportional share. And that's absolutely wrong. That's an incorrect interpretation of the funding law. This illustrates, as we said, you know, I won't repeat what we said, but I'll just say that there is no proportional obligation once a unified tax rate is set. That's your tax rate. It's not, Dummerston's going to pay 10% and Brattleboro's going to pay 60% and so on. And that seems to be a misunderstanding for a lot of folks. So it speaks to the earlier question that again, a $500,000 new program investment has a 2-cent impact proportionally, 100,000 on a 100 student system is 10 times that impact. That it's simply prohibitive to make progress on some of those equity issues that we've identified.
Okay, so let's close that down.
So guys, let's take, we're running late. Thank you, Frank and Ron and Lyle for that. We're running late, but I would like to take about 5 minutes or so for public comments. Is that okay? And then we'll just talk for a moment and then.
So could I ask Deb, you had wanted to have some time.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have a question, but it'd be good if you had a question we could take.
You'll pass? Go ahead.
This is to follow up on Dick's comment earlier about, centralizing services. I mean, right now you have, several employees at WSESU that service the entire district, like Lyle's job, for example, and speech and things like that. Why can't that same model be used, to create the efficiencies you're discussing? Why can't that same model be used on, and you hire the employee and it gets distributed where the need is?
So an example is art teachers. We have a part-time art teacher in Guilford, and it's going to be at Green Street.
Yeah, so why can't you hire an art teacher?
We are. And so 60% of that is assigned to Green Street. 40% of that is assigned to Guilford.
Okay.
The way the system works now is it's got to go through those separate budgets, Brattleboro Town and Guilford. We can't combine that. So that half salary is divided, let's say, by 110 kids at Guilford and 265, I guess in Brattleboro's case, it's the 800 students. And so it has much less of an impact on the Brattleboro Town schools than it does in Guilford. That's the constraint that we're under in this system now. So we try to maximize resources as much as we can. I think that special ed consolidation is eye-opening in terms of, I thought we did a really good job with special ed staff and sharing staff and that sort of thing. But when you assign it to a particular district in their budget, it just is unmanageable for certain schools that could not afford the behavior interventionists and some of the specialized services that larger districts like Brattleboro or the high school could afford. And so by consolidating it, we're able to spread out the staff much more evenly. The cost is evenly proportioned, and the services are getting to communities that couldn't afford those services.
Were some schools charged for those services that didn't use them?
Before?
Well, when you say you spread the cost over the district to make it affordable for these districts that did need these special teachers or...
No, they didn't get those services.
We didn't get the services.
They didn't get the services because they couldn't afford them. So now, because they're spread over 2,500 students, we can easily, one initiative that we did is take paras that were assigned to individual districts and put them into the SU and are able to train those paras as behavioral technicians that can serve in all of the schools, in their particular schools. Those individual district schools couldn't afford that.
I understand that, and I guess I'm saying, why can't you use the same model? Why can't the WSESU hire that art teacher or that music teacher or that, and be under the WSESU budget and spread that, or that would be spread over all the communities. It wouldn't be on a as-used basis, just like your special ed.
Yeah, that's what unification does.
Yeah, so why can't it be done this way?
But you did it with the special ed.
Yeah.
Why can't
Well,
you
that
do
was
it with
a
everything
stable-
else?
Because it's consolidated. It's unified.
Yeah.
It wasn't proportionate. It wasn't-
What you're talking about is if you know the budget is 57 million, why can't you do the math and figure out how much it is per town and charge the town that? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying fold it into the WSESU budget.
Just like you
And
did.
assess the towns like you do now with the WSESU budget. And that person, like Lyle, or the speech therapist can go where required, where needed, but it's paid throughout the district.
Do you want to explain
They were paid though, but I think, I think it's the allocation method that doesn't make sense to me, because if you're not consolidated, the only way to allocate it out would be per student, and that's where that inequality or that inefficiency is.
What you're talking about is allocating it on per use basis per student. You know, in other words, if it's going to Guilford will get charged 40% or 30%. But if it was district-wide, I guess, I just don't understand, I can't make that leap that it cannot be done either contractually or as a matter of policy from the supervisory union through the various communities. And if you could do that, that would solve a lot of the concerns that people have about local control, about losing their voice. And I don't understand why.
Here's a very short response to
And then
that.
let's move on.
So I think it does exactly the opposite of what you were just saying, in that, the concept of local control that people often refer to is the ability for the electorate to influence the board's discretion over a local school budget. Well, if you assign all of your employment to some other entity, you as a local board have discretion over nothing.
No, not all of it.
Well,
that's 80% would be.
That's what you're saying. You're saying take all the teachers and.
No, I'm saying take some of these teachers that are being partially assigned.
We already do that.
Yeah, now that you're doing that, but you're charging the local district for.
But the substantial commitment in terms of spending and employment is the teachers, the classroom teacher.
Yeah.
And so we can't, that just doesn't make sense to, employ folks that are under the direction of a local school board, on a complete system-wide basis, and assign them to a different employer, but have a different governing entity. You've disconnected governance and performance and accountability with that.
It's 8:15.
But that's because the special ed
I bet
director.
you could stay up till 9.
No, I do this a lot.
That's okay, thank you.
I appreciate if it's incredibly short, Richard.
Your vote, when you vote these articles out, is it done on a basis of a supermajority or a simple majority?
It's a simple majority.
Of the voting members.
And then at the forums, I assume that by the time you get to doing forums on this bill, on this consolidation issue, there will be no time or opportunity for sharing of any other idea. You'll be really focused on the articles.
Yeah, I would imagine that someone will share from the floor.
Yeah, but not
But
entertaining.
now, I think we need to talk about the forums. I think a lot of us have expectations. There will be a lot of time spent dedicated on those forums.
Yeah, I know, and I don't mean to interrupt your what you have to get through. I understand that. I just wondered if there would be any point or time in looking at other ideas by then. I mean, you're going to be talking hopefully to more people than this to convince, or inform.
Inform so
before you
that
get
they
to
can
a
make
vote.
their own decisions, yeah.
All right, well, maybe there are other ways to share.
All right, guys, since it's almost 8:20, I'm gonna ask, there are big agenda items that we need to, so the 27th, we all really need to attend. A couple of us have not been coming to meetings recently, well, not a couple, but there's been lack of attendance recently, so we really must all be here on the 27th.
At the high school at 9:30 in the morning.
Well, no,
No,
so that's the 25th.
That's the 25th.
The 27th is in Vernon.
No. The 27th is at the high school as well.
BUHS.
Yep,
Multi-purpose room.
Yep.
So there are 2 meetings at BUHS,
They're
I'm
both-
sorry.
That'll make it easier.
Yes, thank you. Because we have a lot, we have big,
Okay, 27th is at the high school.
we have a lot of discussion on a couple articles and then we need to vote. This the current draft's gonna be sent up, have you sent it to Donna recently? Okay, so, we have a lot of work to do on that, I would imagine we will run late that night. Is there anything else before there's a motion to adjourn?
Well, when do you vote on whether you're gonna go with the accelerator or not?
So the 27th, we will be voting on this report.
But that's not whether you're gonna go that way or not.
We will be voting on the language, the article language, whether it's all towns going together or whether there would be a mud. Yeah.
I have a question, and this, I'll make it real quick, but we
Yeah.
have a website for Act 46, correct?
Mhm.
Is it possible to create a public forum whereby people who have questions from the public can pose a question there, and either somebody from the administration, the school board, the study committee, or another member of the public can answer that question?
I think that would be considered an issue with open meeting.
I mean, yeah.
Well, it's a public screen, you know, whereby I've got this question, da-da-da-da, and somebody supplies it.
I don't think you could.
We can't do it?
You
Okay.
can't answer the
I
question.
don't think you can answer the
I
question.
think the question could be posted, but I don't
Well,
think
then
you
the
can
question
answer
for
it.
posted, at least we give it consideration.
The best
Maybe
way
that can
is
be done.
to contact your individual
Yeah.
reps.
But I do
or your
think,
local
you know,
board.
I think what you're throwing as, for the forums, you could put out some sort of request for questions so that in each town that the study committee is ready to address them, to
Because
answer
there may
them.
be several hundred questions, but basically like 10 questions asked 100 times each.
Yeah, so some sort of,
So Mark, while you're on TV, just ask that question again.
Hi, Mom.
Any Act 46 question could come to a study committee member.
If you have any questions about Act 46 and the machinations of this study committee, please by all means address them to the Act 46 website. Is that?
Or committee members.
Or
Committee members, not.
Right, thank you.
And their email addresses should be on the website.
or
Yeah.
just give your email
Website.
address.
Hi, Dad. How are you?
Okay. Walter?
At the next meeting, will there be specific motions for the sections of the articles that we're voting on, or will there be the ability for any change to come forward as a motion?
I think we can talk about that at the beginning of the next meeting. I don't wanna answer that question.
But there'll be no
now.
motions ahead of time that will be prepared and in the agenda, section 1, section 3, whatever.
No one has raised that here.
And I think the question that came up a moment ago was, to the comment you made, Alice, at our last meeting, was someone, any one of us could make the motion to stop moving forward on the accelerated plan.
Yeah.
And so, it sounds like we're there, I mean, someone can just do it, but there will not be an agenda item formally asking that question.
Right.
Would that be a 5-4 vote as well? A simple majority?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Now, tonight we had talked about the 10-year thing for Vernon. We really didn't come to a conclusion as to what we would like to do, and I think that could be, we should probably talk about that a little bit more.
Oh,
And that way the language is in there already before next meeting.
you wanna talk about it now?
I feel we need to get that ironed out, that way it can be already put into the article and not have to do a little bit of legwork at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I took notes from the discussion. I think it would be appropriate for at least for consideration of the grandfathering of the students as 7th graders next year through 12th.
That was my feeling.
Is that what, you would prefer that to be in there? Is the first,
The current students attending 7 through 12
Hmm.
would be grandfathered in, any other existing students would not qualify. That's the way I feel, but that's,
That was, I think from Putney, that was the
The
perspective
census,
that we had.
Yeah,
And
well,
even then, it was.
we could put that in the article and that could be the article voted on, and if that did not pass, then there could be another proposed version of the article. Does that work?
Sure.
So what we'll do is,
Right?
I'll get, some of you have language to add, and we'll collect all that, and we'll get another version out to all of you dated sometime before April 27th. You know. I don't know.
Allison, you're talking about drafting new language at the meeting and then writing it up somehow so
Well-
that it,
Well, we've talked, which Alice are you talking about? We talked about other language. This was just a recent change, so we have history of other language.
It's reverting to old language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I understand that, but for example, the proposal I gave you, you will not be discussing it between now and then.
Well, we'll be, not between now and then, but we will, at the next meeting, address the leadership council.
Yeah. And people will be looking at your
Yeah.
language with their boards if they choose to bring it to the attention of their boards.
And how would language get included in the proposal that you're gonna then vote on that night?
We would look at it right then and there.
At the next meeting.
Well, and my understanding is the only thing that is absolutely essential that we vote on at that meeting on the 27th are the things that are relevant to the petitions and the warnings of the
Yeah,
meeting.
we need to vote the report so that Donna can take it to, Donna Russo Savage can take it to Rebecca Holcomb, who can review it with the Board of Ed.
So it needs to be 100% done by the end of the 22nd.
No,
It needs to be pretty well finished. I know, listening to Donna and Chris Leopold, they get reports, they tweak it, they bring it back, they send it back, they want you to modify things, and so there's gonna be some back and forth.
Between the whole study committee?
Yeah,
mhm.
yeah.
And then the Board of Ed would, you know, if we decide it would go, to move forward, it would go to the Board of Ed on May 17th. And then certainly they might tweak it a little bit.
Right.
They might say, oh, that's not gonna work,
That's a tweak.
which is why we all ideally go to that meeting wherever it is, I don't know where it is.
Chris.
How many votes are there?
I just have a quick devil in the details question because from Chris Leopold's presentation on board representation that I was photocopying recently, he says that at-large members can only be from necessary districts in a MUD on his caution, page 17. So I just think we should maybe look at that before we decide on this at-large, if we're talking about necessary versus advisable. If this is still Chris Leopold's advice, that would only, if Brattleboro is the only necessary district, the at-large members would have to be from Brattleboro, I believe, based on Chris Leopold's PowerPoint.
So he's reviewing the report.
Okay.
But only in a mud, not in the
Okay.
sun.
That's only in the
Guys,
mud. That's only in the mud option if we're gonna do that. So I just wanted to.
It's 8:25.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Is there a second, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, everyone.
Let's see how we started again, I like that.